Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Natasha Schoeler, and I will be presenting on our work that we have done in individuals with Glut1 deficiency syndrome and their families regarding what matters to them and what implications this has for research. So we're talking here about patient and public involvement, PPI, with the longer title of patient and public engagement. Just to go over exactly what this is, so patient and public involvement is research that is done with or by the public, not to, about, or for them. And I quote the Health Research Authority here. So crucially, we're not talking about individuals that are participating in the research itself. And related, but slightly different, patient and public engagement is about sharing information and knowledge about research with the public. And when I say the public, I don't necessarily just mean members of the public. I mean patients, obviously very relevant here, potential patients, carers, people who use specific health and care social services, or people that may represent people who use those services, such as their parents and carers. And also patient and public engagement involves patients or others with relevant experience contributing to how research is designed, conducted, and disseminated. Why do we care about PPI? Well, it helps to make our research more relevant so that the results of our research are more likely to benefit patients and the public. It helps us conduct research in a way that is hopefully more acceptable to participants, and this is particularly important in areas that may be particularly sensitive or controversial. It helps us to improve the informed consent process, so make it easier for prospective participants to understand the research and its potential risks and benefits. Improving the experience of people participating in research, so checking that everything's practical for them and an respectful use of their time. And also improving communications of our findings to participants and the wider public. There is a big drive now with the NHS and associated bodies to think about PPI, both for healthcare services and also research. NHS has a patient and public participation policy, which is a policy to obviously strengthen patient and public participation, which provides guidance for clinical commissioning groups and frameworks for conducting PPI in primary care and public health commissioning, etc. Ultimately with the aim of reducing inequalities between patients with access to and outcomes from healthcare services. And also the MHRA, so the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, and HRA2 have launched a pilot scheme to really put patients at the heart of clinical trials. So they're really putting the onus on the sponsor to provide evidence that individuals have involved patients and patient representatives when they develop clinical trials, which is already positive. I wanted to highlight to you an example of using PPI in research. So this example has nothing to do with epilepsy or Glut1. In fact, it's a recent trial from Denmark that includes patients with metastatic melanoma that looked to assess the effect of using patient-reported outcome measures in consultations. And in this study, they really made a great effort to include PPI at all stages of the research process, right from identifying and prioritizing what to research in the first place, right through to evaluating the impact of the study after it took place. I'm just going to hone in on a couple of these examples just to give you an idea of the impact that PPI can have on a study. So in the designing and managing phase, so this is basically when they're designing the actual trial, the research team had 4 meetings with patient representatives. And in these meetings, they chose the outcome measures for the research project and also for a dialogue tool. And something that the PPI made happen, so this wouldn't have happened if the researchers hadn't engaged with the patient participants, in that there was an emphasis on psychosocial issues in the outcome measures, which is great. Also in these meetings, they composed the patient information sheet and selected an intervention fidelity study design. So the patient representatives had input into the methods and timescales with this. In the undertaking, so more the analysis phase, This is something that really struck me actually, as something that I haven't seen very often at all. They adopted a co-production analysis approach where actually data analysis was done both by the researchers and the patient representatives, which I thought was fab. So they had initially a joint training day to get everyone up to speed on how to do this, obviously, and then various data analysis sort of tasks as homework and consensus meetings in between these to discuss the results. And then an evaluation workshop afterwards where participants were invited to the meeting as well to share the trial results. And so this is just a small snapshot of what they did, so a huge amount of work. As for PPI in ketogenic diet related studies, I have to say we've still got a bit of a way to go, but we're definitely getting better. So as part of the ketogenic diet in infants with epilepsy trial, there has been PPI involvement in that. So, for example, one of the patient representatives has launched, at the moment online, Coffee Morning, where parents of participants of the trial have discussed their experiences and really helped to shape how we should conduct the trial going forward, and obviously future trials as well. And in an internal conference that we had, this patient representative presented very eloquently on their experience of being part of the trial, which involved starting the ketogenic diet. And it really highlighted to all of us the amount of work that was involved, and also some amusing anecdotes as well. But it really, really highlighted the challenges, and it was really enlightening. And also, as part of our department, we are we've done a fair amount of PPI work, actually, focus groups, interviews, for example, to really hone down on what research priorities there are for the next trials in ketogenic diet related research. The keting trial is another example of where PPI has been used in a ketogenic diet related trial. So this was a feasibility study using the ketogenic diet as an adjunctive treatment for glioblastoma. They undertook a PPI event prior to doing the research, seeking patients and public involvement in identifying research priorities and also outcome measures for ketogenic diets in glioblastoma. And also, following feedback, they made improvements to patient information leaflets, recruitment processes, clinical consultations, etc. I put some other examples here up on the screen of not technically PPI, but studies that have really taken patient involvement as part of their core. So one of these being Core KDT, which is based in Plymouth, where they're conducting, I believe, many interviews, focus groups, etc., to define core outcomes for individuals with epilepsy who are on ketogenic diet therapy. And also an Australian study where they involved patients as participants in an iterative research process using interviews and so on to develop and pilot a quality of life measure, which is all really positive, and not PPI but related to it. As for PPI and individuals with Glut1 deficiency syndrome, I'm afraid it's even less. The examples are even less, at least. So we know mostly what to do clinically with individuals with Glut1 in the updated guidelines, of course. But when assessing the impact, for example, of a new intervention, this doesn't necessarily equate to what methods or what outcomes are appropriate to use in a research study involving these particular individuals. And some of the very few examples of engaging with patient representatives to find out how we can help individuals with Glut1 deficiency are the adult experiences in Glut1 deficiency. This was the first ever large-scale survey of adult patients, which aimed to share experiences and build resources to better address patient needs and ultimately lead to patient care. And also the Glut1 Deficiency Foundation have launched very recently their community, or they will launch their community voice survey to gather data on patient experience, which of course can be used in multiple ways, both to directly for patient care, but also for helping to design future research studies. Why should we care so much about doing PPI with individuals with Glut1 deficiency syndrome? Well, we know that thankfully these individuals have a treatment of choice, which is generally very effective, the ketogenic diet, but different to people with other types of epilepsy, the benefits of this treatment have no clear end date. So it is the case that individuals with Glut1 are perhaps recommended to stay on the diet for life, or they at least continue it for as long as they can and are willing to. Which is fab, but we know may not necessarily be the easiest thing. We do also know that individuals with Glut1 have borderline impaired health-related quality of life, and this is in line with children with other chronic conditions. We also know that those with movement disorder have worse performance in health and social functioning. I wanted to quote Costello, who back in the 80s said that psychosocial health was the new hidden morbidity. And it's really this, it's the lifelong challenges that individuals with Glut1 experience that make it even more important to involve them from the very outset in research that's hopefully going to benefit them and to really make it relevant. So when thinking about studies to conduct involving and hopefully benefiting individuals with Glut1 deficiency, we first think, okay, what sort of intervention to do? And this is particularly relevant for those with Glut1 because we have this treatment of choice, the ketogenic diet. And what exactly do we assess? What is important to them? What are the outcome measures? And then once we've defined these, how is best to measure them and for how long? Of course, we don't have the answers to this, so we thought, right, let's make a start and try and find out some of these answers ourselves. So what we did is we recruited individuals either with Glut1 deficiency or their parents' carers to take part in focus groups to discuss about how we could make future research projects most meaningful to them. And we managed to do this with the help of the Glut1 Deficiency Foundation and also Matthew's friends kindly putting the word out for us. We had 3 main questions to answer. So the first one being, what is meaningful for individuals with Glut1 deficiency and their parents' carers? How to measure meaningful results of treatment in individuals with Glut1 in research studies? And what are the motivators and barriers for these individuals to participate or not in research studies? So we included individuals with Glut1 or their parent or carer representative. The individuals who attended the focus group had to have the ability to give informed consent or assent and be able to speak fluent English. We excluded individuals who could not participate due to factors that may cause difficulties in the focus group process or cause emotional distress to the participant. This is particularly relevant seeing as these focus groups, of course, in recent times had to be conducted online, which brings its own set of challenges both for the researcher and for the attendees. So we had 22 participants in all from all around the globe, which is certainly a benefit of conducting these groups online. This included 2 individuals with Glut1 deficiency who directly took part in the focus groups, and the rest were their parents or carers talking on behalf of the individuals with Glut1. So of those with Glut1, the median age was 12 years, and it ranged from 3 to 27 years. And the median age at which they were diagnosed with Glut1 was approaching 5 years and ranged from 0.3 to 18 years. In just over half of the individuals with Glut1 deficiency, or some of these were represented by their parents or carers, just over half were solely on ketogenic diet therapy. An additional 5 were taking anti-seizure drugs as well as ketogenic diet therapy. 2 were just on anti-seizure drugs, and 3 were also on medication for ADHD. Previous treatments taken for Glut1, 2 of them had previously tried but were currently not following ketogenic diet, and a couple had tried C7 oil, cornstarch, one had tried metformin, and obviously a range of anti-seizure drugs had been taken as well. So our results, thinking about the first question, what is meaningful to individuals with Glut1 and their families? Based on their thoughts and ideas, we were able to group the answers to this question into 3 themes. The first one being individuality and flexibility. So it really was clear that although obviously everybody had or was representing somebody with Glut1, they were all extremely different and unique in their own way. And so what was important to them and their families, of course, differed. And even for one particular individual, what was important for them and their families changed over time, depending on their age, their clinical condition, their developmental status, their general life stage. However, there were a few strands that were consistent. So for those with seizures, stopping seizures was certainly of utmost importance. And also having a good quality of life, which of course encompasses a variety of things, was important across the board as well. Something else which was certainly important was continuity of the benefits of treatment. So something that really came to light was that individuals could be fabulous one day from a clinical point of view and not so fabulous on the next day. So they wanted something that meant, for example, for individuals that had a movement disorder, that they were able to know that they'd be able to ride their bike for half an hour or whatever it was whenever they wanted, not that they could only do that on a good day and they knew it wouldn't be possible on a bad day. So continuity of treatment of the benefits. And also beneath the surface, it was clear that families wanted individuals to have a good understanding of the world around them, of their peers, to be as independent as possible, and of course to be as happy as possible. And actually, interestingly, the happiness and well-being of the parents' carers was something that was highlighted too, which I liked. So the second question, how to assess these meaningful outcomes as part of a research study, we went through a variety of tools, measures, options that could be used to assess the previously mentioned outcomes, some of which were very well received and others of which were not so well received. So for those with seizures, recording these seizures in a diary or on an app was generally very well received, and the same for those with movement disorders. This seemed to be something that people were very used to, I'm sure, as part of clinical practice as well. And they certainly welcomed the option to have electronic stroke online option to record these as well. We discussed how people would feel about wearing a wearable device, possibly to sort of more automatically assess seizures or maybe even movement disorders. This actually was taken very positively, although there was some questioning over what exactly these devices could pick up. The gait test, so looking at how an individual with Glut1 walks over a certain distance, was something that was fairly well received actually. And so this is something that we definitely want to bear in mind. And also use of questionnaires. Individuals and their families seem to be very au fait with completing questionnaires, although something that struck me was that they really welcomed the option to put their own comments, their own thoughts and views into perhaps a free text box at the end, because of course there was the realization that many sort of more standardized questionnaires didn't actually cover all the points that they wanted to raise or things that were relevant to them. But having said that, they did welcome sort of having something structured, a structured questionnaire there at the beginning to prompt them for certain things as well. A test that looked at any changes in development or cognition, I have to say, were not actually that well received, partially because of the length of time that they often take to complete. This was certainly a concern, and also due to a concern that there may not be a willingness of the participant to actually complete these tests, and this may very much depend on the rapport that they had with the researcher, and this may take a while to establish. Also, the 6 or even 12-minute walk test was something that was not too well received either, I have to say, and this is seems to be quite a standard outcome measure that is used in these individuals. They were concerned that 6 or 12 minutes may not be long enough to detect any changes, but more they were concerned about an individual's variability of stamina, for example. So as I said, with the desire for continuity of benefits of treatment, they were very aware that on one day an individual may be able to walk not very far at all if they had a movement disorder, or whereas on another day they'd be able to walk for miles and be absolutely fine. So motivators and barriers to participating in research. Top of the list was definitely safety of the product or intervention that was being studied. This was really, really important to individuals. And if it helped people to understand the mechanisms of action behind the particular product or intervention, then this was very welcome. Consistency as well. Families wanted them or their children to be able to carry on with the treatments that they were already taking, perhaps take part in other trials at the same time if they wanted to, and crucially to continue taking the product, if it was a product, after the end of the trial period. And they really wanted something that was easy to do. I quote, "My life is already really, really complicated." So they wanted something that was also manageable by others besides the main carer, which of course is understandable. Also, individuals really welcome the choice to conduct study visits either in the hospital or also at home. They wanted that flexibility, that choice, which of course in recent times is certainly something that has been, I think, made more possible, at least with online options, etc. And they also thought that generally a follow-up time period of between 6 and 12 months was both adequate, of course, depending on what was being measured, but also acceptable to them, an acceptable amount of time to be in the study and have that commitment. So implications for us and for anybody that's thinking of conducting any research studies, including individuals with Glut1, we really have to make sure that we appropriately and adequately communicate the safety profile of the product or intervention, and perhaps tailor the intervention depending on the willingness and ability of the prospective participants and their families, perhaps going into more detail about the mechanism of action if that's wanted or warranted. Ease, of course, and continuity of treatment. So really making sure that we're able to provide the product or intervention beyond the end of the study period, and making sure that it's something that's easy to fit into the lives, already very complicated lives of individuals with Glut1. Some flexibility with regards study visit locations. This would be fabulous, although definitely challenging. Of course, this is going to impact, for example, what staff you're going to need to conduct the study appointment, depending on where it takes place, and also the equipment you need. Think about it. If you want to take blood tests at various study visits, how are you going to do that at home? Is it possible? If so, what equipment are you going to need? Who's going to need to do it? What are you going to do with the samples afterwards, etc.? It's not impossible, it's certainly not, but it's sort of a new way of thinking about it. We need to think about how best to measure the effects of a particular treatment on movement disorders. It seems to be a little bit more clear-cut for seizures. And it's, yes, that's just something to really that we have to bear in mind, the different options that are available and how acceptable they'll be to potential participants. And it seems to be that possibly a maximum of 12 months follow-up is acceptable to people. So I really wanted to highlight the importance to you of conducting PPI at all stages of the research cycle, right from the beginning. And hopefully I've done that. And also given you some examples of how PPI can be used in the study, obviously which can be adapted to individuals with any condition. And also given you a snapshot of some thoughts from our PPI work, emphasising what we and others need to bear in mind when developing research with these individuals. Here are my acknowledgements and some references. Thank you very much.